2020, my son had an award, and a trust was set up by the court to deal with his finances as part of that award with a legal trustee. And in 2023, when me and my husband divorced, the decision was, because that home was adapted to support my son who has lifelong.
Angela Rayner stamp duty scandal. The full story. Right then, before we dive into what might be the most damaging political scandal of the year, make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors, because we're about to unpack a story that goes far deeper than the headline suggests. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has just admitted to what can only be described as a spectacular miscalculation that could cost her £40,000 and potentially her career. Angela Rayner, the woman who sits second in command of our government, has confessed she didn't pay sufficient stamp duty on her £800,000 beachfront apartment in Hove. But here's where it gets interesting, and frankly, rather more complicated than anyone initially thought. For weeks, Rayner's allies have been categorically denying any wrongdoing, painting critics as partisan attackers attempting to smear a working-class politician who'd made good. They were wrong, dead wrong, and now we have the admission, straight from the horse's mouth, that she's likely facing a bill that could reach £40,000 in additional property taxes. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like another politician trying to dodge their responsibilities, hit that subscribe button, because we're going to examine exactly how this unfolded and why it matters far more than a simple tax miscalculation. The mechanics of this affair are rather more intricate than your average political scandal. Rayner owns 3 properties: her constituency home in Ashton-under-Lyne, a rather posh apartment in Admiralty House on Whitehall, and this controversial beachfront unit in Hove. When she purchased the whole property in May, she classified it as a sole residence, which entitled her to pay the lowest stamp duty rate of £30,000 rather than the higher rate of £70,000 that applies to additional properties. But here's the rub, and it's a significant one. Elsewhere in official documentation, she's identified her constituency residence as her main residence. You can't have it both ways in the eyes of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and therein lies a problem that's now threatening to derail one of the most prominent political careers in modern Britain. The Deputy Prime Minister has now referred herself to the Independent Advisor on Ministerial Standards, and she's admitted something rather telling. She considered resigning over this matter. When a politician of Rayner's stature contemplates resignation, you know the situation has moved well beyond a simple administrative error. But wait, there's more to this story, and if you're not already subscribed, you really should be, because what happens next could reshape the entire political landscape. Rayner's explanation is particularly fascinating from a political psychology perspective. She claimed she received poor tax advice and relied on guidance that didn't adequately address the complicated aspects of a trust arrangement. According to her account, leading tax counsel later examined the situation and determined that the property remained her sole ownership despite the trust structure, meaning she should have paid the higher stamp duty rate all along. The human element of this story cannot be ignored. Rayner has spoken openly about the impact on her family, particularly her son, who has a life-altering, lifelong condition. She's described feeling set up and being in shock because she believed she'd followed all the rules correctly. There's something rather tragic about a politician who's built a career on representing working-class values finding herself embroiled in a property tax scandal involving an £800,000 beachfront apartment. The political implications extend far beyond Rayner's personal circumstances. This revelation comes at a time when the Labour government is already facing scrutiny over various policy positions, and having the Deputy Prime Minister admit to a significant tax error hardly strengthens their credibility on fiscal responsibility. The opposition will undoubtedly seize upon this as evidence of Labour's inability to manage their own affairs, let alone the country's finances. What makes this particularly damaging is the nature of the error itself. Stamp duty on property purchases is hardly an obscure tax provision known only to specialists. It's a fundamental aspect of property ownership that millions of Britons deal with regularly. For the Deputy Prime Minister to claim ignorance or reliance on poor advice strains credibility, especially given her access to top-tier legal and financial advisors. The £162,000 profit Rayner made from selling her share in what she designated as her primary residence adds another layer of complexity to this affair. The financial benefits of misclassifying properties for tax purposes become rather more significant when viewed alongside these profits. It's the kind of detail that transforms a story from administrative incompetence into something that looks suspiciously like calculated advantage-taking. Make sure you're subscribed because the ramifications of this scandal are still unfolding, and we'll be tracking every development as it happens. The court order preventing Rayner from disclosing certain details about her housing arrangements adds an intriguing element of mystery to proceedings. What exactly is being kept from public scrutiny? Why are there confidential clauses involved in what should be straightforward property transactions? These questions suggest there may be additional complexities yet to emerge. The timing of this revelation couldn't be worse for Labour. With local elections approaching and the government's approval ratings already under pressure, the last thing they needed was a deputy prime minister embroiled in a tax scandal that reinforces negative perceptions about political elites living by different rules than ordinary citizens. Rayner's political brand has always been built on authenticity and connection to working-class values. She's positioned herself as someone who understands ordinary people's struggles because she's lived them. Owning 3 properties, including an £800,000 beachfront apartment, while making tax calculation errors that save tens of thousands of pounds, sits rather uncomfortably with that carefully constructed image. The constitutional questions raised by this affair are also significant. Should the Deputy Prime Minister resign over what she characterizes as an honest mistake based on poor advice? Where exactly is the line between incompetence and misconduct when it comes to senior government ministers? These aren't merely academic questions. They go to the heart of accountability in public office. The independent advisor on ministerial standards will now investigate whether Rayner has breached the ministerial code. This process could take weeks or months, during which time she'll remain in post but under a cloud of suspicion that will inevitably affect her ability to perform her duties effectively. For those keeping score at home, this represents a remarkable fall from grace for someone who was considered a potential future Labour leader. Rayner's working-class background and plain-speaking style made her popular with party members and voters alike. This scandal, regardless of its ultimate resolution, will permanently alter how she's perceived in British politics. The broader implications for property ownership and tax policy are also worth considering. If the Deputy Prime Minister can make such significant errors in understanding stamp duty obligations, what does that say about the complexity of our tax system? Should the rules be clearer, or should we expect higher standards of competence from those in government? Subscribe to UK Connors now because this story is far from over, and the political consequences will ripple through Westminster for months to come. What's particularly striking about Rayner's response is her emphasis on family protection and the vulnerability of her son. While these concerns are entirely understandable and legitimate, they also serve to deflect attention from the core issues of tax compliance and ministerial standards. It's a reminder that political scandals always have human costs beyond the immediate protagonists. The fact that Rayner considered resignation suggests she understands the gravity of the situation. In British politics, contemplating resignation is rarely mentioned lightly, especially by senior ministers. It indicates recognition that the scandal could prove terminal to her political career, regardless of the eventual findings of any investigation. The revelation that she relied on professional advice that proved inadequate raises questions about due diligence and personal responsibility. While it's reasonable to seek professional guidance on complex tax matters, ultimate responsibility for compliance rests with the individual. For someone in Rayner's position, the expectation of exemplary conduct is particularly high. This scandal also highlights the scrutiny faced by modern politicians regarding their personal finances. Every property transaction, every investment decision, every tax calculation is potentially subject to public examination. It's a level of transparency that would be uncomfortable for most private citizens, but is arguably necessary for those in public office. The political damage to Labour extends beyond Rayner herself. The party's credibility on issues of tax fairness and fiscal responsibility inevitably suffers when their Deputy Prime Minister admits to underpaying property taxes. It provides ammunition for opponents and creates awkward questions for other Labour politicians about their own financial affairs. As this story continues to develop, the key question remains whether Rayner can survive politically. She's referred herself for investigation, admitted her error, and expressed contrition. Whether that's sufficient to maintain her position will depend largely on the findings of the independent advisor and the broader political reaction in the coming weeks. What we're witnessing is a masterclass in how quickly political fortunes can change in modern Britain. One day you're the Deputy Prime Minister with aspiration for higher office. The next you're contemplating resignation over a tax calculation that went wrong. It's a reminder that in politics, as in life, the details matter enormously. This scandal will undoubtedly feature in political textbooks as an example of how personal financial matters can derail even the most promising political careers. Whether it becomes a cautionary tale or merely a temporary setback remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, Angela Rayner's political trajectory has been permanently altered by this revelation. So there you have it, the complete picture of a scandal that's shaken Westminster to its core. The Deputy Prime Minister's admission that she underpaid stamp duty isn't just about tax calculations. It's about trust, competence, and whether our politicians are held to the same standards as everyone else. Subscribe to UK Connors for more in-depth political analysis. And remember, in British politics, the next scandal is always just around the corner, so you won't want to miss what we uncover next.